Ladies and gentlemen, drivers, gig workers, and everyone in between, welcome to This Week in Rideshare Podcast. I'm your host, Jared Hoffa. It is Friday, May 22nd, and this week, Airbnb is adding car rentals, Waymo suspends service, and Uber is bringing back AVs. Legal Rideshare breaks it down. There we go. And from Legal Rideshare, I'm joined by the co-founder and lead attorney, Bryant Greening. Bryant, happy Memorial Day weekend.
Happy Friday and Memorial Day weekend, Jared. It's great to be here. Excited to ring in the holiday weekend.
Yes, it's been a minute since we've done this. I did another This Week in Rideshare in the car. We had Teddy on yesterday, so we're back to the OG with some really interesting stories.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to get back to the original version of the podcast, but it's really cool to see the new content that we're creating. You're doing an awesome job in the car. I think
Thanks.
it's it's a fun, different way to deliver the information and the news, and it catches the eye, and I love hearing what you have to say about it. So while I'm excited to be back here, I'm also loving the other things that we're doing, in the meantime.
I will say, for those who do these videos like I did in the car for This Week in Rideshare, it's not easy. So hats off to you guys who do this. A lot of other drivers have done that for a long time. I've been testing it out, but man, is that tough. But that being said, we're gonna jump in here to our first story. Uh, we talked about this internationally, but now it's hitting locally, and there's a lot to discuss. Airbnb is going beyond rooms, and this is from Bloomberg, and they reported, "quote Airbnb will let guests arrange luggage storage, airport pickups, and most importantly, car and equipment rentals in its latest effort to expand beyond short-term rentals." Airbnb wants to become an ecosystem of services to address the top pain points in travel. The CEO is saying it's almost like an app store where we work with other developers, other companies, giving them access to Airbnb's global customer base. The company is also testing bundled offers of stays and add-ons. And he explains eventually you can go to Tahoe, we could get you a car, ski rental gear, and groceries. So, Bryant, the reason I wanted to bring this up, we talked about this, I think 2 weeks ago or last time we were on. That was, Airbnb was testing cars internationally. It's already saying they're coming here. And again, we're seeing a consolidation of a company saying we want to be the one-stop shop. And I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it really is. I think that it's a really smart move for Airbnb. It's kind of low-hanging fruit that they haven't captured during the whole time that they've been in existence. They have been so focused on being, the new version of the hotel that some of these other perks that they could be providing have fallen by the wayside, and now they're providing them to customers. I actually just had this experience when I was reading this article and I was thinking, well, I wish this existed a couple months ago. I had an Airbnb booked and I realized that I couldn't get into the Airbnb until 4 o'clock. Yet my flight was landing at 10 a.m. and I was thinking, what am I going to do with my bags? So because of that issue where I didn't have anywhere to store the bags and I had a whole day of plans that I wanted to go explore a city, I ended up canceling the Airbnb and switching to a hotel because the hotel would take the bags until the room was ready. Airbnb is now solving a lot of those problems, those logistical issues that might have taken people away from their service or just made it less convenient. And now by offering things like bag storage, ride pickups from the airport, skis if you're on a mountain, I think it's extremely logical and it's only going to help both the company and the customer. So I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, and I think it is too. And he even, I think it's Brian Chesky is the CEO. He even said, look, we know this is going to actually be an uphill battle because people are used to using, Uber to get a car service and then using whatever for something else. So he even says it's going to be tough, but he believes that hey, we can do this. He even said he's hinting about a half a dozen other services, other rentals. So again, there's this sort of consolidation of some of these bigger players trying to grab the other markets. We're going to talk about this in a little bit with Uber and what they're doing. But yeah, so we're seeing this happen. It's in the fact that it's happening all at the same time makes me feel like all the companies are seeing that at some point there's really going to be winners and losers, and we're not going to have all of these apps. It's probably going to be down to just a few, and I think that it's a race to see who wins.
Yeah, it's going to be consolidation. And just one point on the business, I don't think that Airbnb needs to steal Uber's business. If they get 1% of the ride requests through their app, that's a massive amount of money that's coming into the company that otherwise wouldn't have been there. So they don't have to be the new Uber. They just provide the opportunity to stay in the app. Some people will use it, and it's free revenue.
Right. No, exactly. I think that's their goal. Moving on to the second story. Of course, we've got to talk about Waymo. Waymo has suspended service in Atlanta, and this is from Bloomberg, and they reported, quote, Waymo has temporarily halted service in Atlanta over concerns that its robotaxis may attempt to drive on flooded roads, the latest setback over an issue that recently led the company to recall thousands of vehicles. It is now the second city where the autonomous vehicle unit of Alphabet Incorporated, also known as Google for most people, has suspended service following severe weather. Storms swept through Atlanta on Wednesday, during which an unoccupied Waymo vehicle drove and got stuck in a flooded road. The car has since been recovered and removed. I talked about this myself on This Week in Rideshare, I believe, last week, and we've talked about this a million times. This is the first time we're seeing a complete halt. I know they've been talking about recalling and updating software, or checking on some of the cars. This is a full suspension of service. So they must know. There must be, honestly, and again, this is just my opinion. There must be bigger issues behind the scenes than even we know about.
Yeah, the fact that they've stopped service in a massive market tells us something about what's going on, or how the technology is not adequately prepared for that market. I think weather has always been an issue that has scared these AV companies, which is why they've generally started in more temperate climates, places where they don't have to deal with snow or ice. And this rain in Atlanta, it threw them off course. That this is just one of the reasons and examples of why the technology is not ready for massive scale. I do think that they've had some success in California, they've had some success in Arizona, but the moment that there is any hiccup in variable that the cars have not been prepared for, and have not been trained on, we see how quickly the house of cards collapses. So I'm wondering if what we're seeing in Atlanta is an omen for what's going to happen as the company expands nationwide, and when they come to Chicago and have to deal with the Chicago winter. What is that going to look like? What kind of problems are going to be caused? How are the cars going to respond or not respond? The fact that they're closing down shops so quickly after an event like this, I think it speaks volumes.
Yeah, that's the first thing I thought about was the Philly market, Chicago market. Right, like we I don't know the number off the top of my head anymore of how many they're deploying, but I think it's pretty substantial in both markets. And right, and so are we going to have this thing where you're going to be able to have a Waymo sometimes, and then the service is just gone for months, and then it's back again, and then it's off? I don't think that's going to be very good for the user base, and it's also not going to, give any sort of opinion that this is a stable, consistent, and reliable service if this is what they're going to do. And they're now at a point where people are getting used to it. So,
Right.
so now it's not like, hey, we're still in testing phase. They did this with scooters. Obviously, the e-scooters were different. They did the testing of the scooters for a whole year, and then people got used to the testing, and then they deployed them. But since then, the scooters have always been there. So imagine yanking that out, and there'd be so much frustration. Well, I can't depend on this. I think that's going to be their biggest setback. Is not even the tech or what happens. It's consumers are going to want dependable things, and if they keep having to do this, there's no depend. It's okay. I guess I can get a Waymo sometimes, but
Yeah.
probably not. I mean, it's not going to be very efficient.
Yeah, I think efficiency and availability is a huge concern, but also, as we know, in these colder markets, the weather can turn on a dime. It can be sunny and fine in Chicago, and then literally 1 minute later, you can have a downfall of snow. So if you're in a Waymo and you're driving around and all of a sudden there's a whiteout, how is that vehicle going to respond? So it's not only an availability issue and a dependability issue, it's a safety issue because if that car can't function and you're in it, well, that's obviously not a situation that is a successful one. It's not as planned. It's not safe. It's something that people can be severely injured or imperiled by.
Yeah, yeah, and well, I think we're going to see a lot more of that this summer, or sorry, this winter, because there's more Waymos on the road. They're in more markets. As my favorite line, "Time will tell." But this is kind of the canary. So we'll see what happens as we move forward. Our final story, which is my favorite, and I can't wait to talk about this for multiple reasons. But Uber is putting its AVs back on the road, and this is from The Verge, and they reported, quote, Uber is putting its own autonomous vehicles back on the road as part of its new AV lab project to collect data for dozens of its robotaxi partners. The car will be fitted with all the sensors typical of a self-driving car, but notably, the vehicles will not be operating as robotaxis, just gathering data for Uber's dozens of robotaxi partners. Because these startups are so hungry for data, Uber is deploying a fleet of vehicles with all the necessary hardware for autonomous driving on its ride-hail network. These vehicles, which will be manually driven, will generate revenue and complete regular Uber trips. More importantly, they'll be, quote, getting exposure to the variety of edge cases our network handles countless times each day as we fulfill the 40 million trips daily. This is really interesting, Bryant, because it's a combination of things we've been talking about for a long time. It feels like a bullseye hit for me. Uber figured out a way to get into the AV game without getting into the AV game and leaning into their tech side because they keep saying they're a tech company and still becoming the leader and the leader of the whole space. If this works, it's truly brilliant. Honestly, it's a clever move.
Yes, I totally agree. I was reading this article and I was thinking this is exactly what they need to be doing.
Yeah.
They don't need to be creating the autonomous vehicle rides. They don't need to be the ones who are operating the vehicles. Instead, they have all these cars that are already on the road. They have all these customers who need rides. They have a way to profit by picking up passengers in these cars while also collecting data that they can sell to all the third parties that are way ahead in terms of the technology of the AVs, but still need tons of data and don't really have access to it. So they are going to it's like a triple play here. They are making money while they're collecting this on their rideshare rides. They are collecting data that they can sell, and then when these vehicles from these third party groups want to come in and actually enter the markets where Uber is, those vehicles will be listed on the Uber platform because there's going to be an arrangement where if you got data from Uber, you've got to list your car on the Uber app. So I mean, it's money now, it's money later. It's entering the future of rideshare, which is autonomous vehicles, without having to put the resources into creating the vehicles themselves. They're not having to come up with all the technology, which they tried to do for a while and failed. I mean, it is just like you said, it's a home run. I think that this is exactly what Uber needed to do. They figured out a way to get into this space, and ultimately, they figured out a way to dominate the space. So, unless their data collection is somehow flawed or
Yeah.
it can't be used in a way that these other companies need, as long as everything goes as planned, this is, I mean, it's a massive hit.
It is, and at least on the optics side too for Uber, it really positions them as not saying, "Hey, we are erasing drivers." It's saying, "Look, these tech companies already exist. They're going to be here anyways, but we're going to support their software." So it's also, at least in the optics now, whether or not they truly believe that is a different story. We know how they treat drivers typically, but in this case, they're not. Because when Uber first came out and was saying we're going to have the autonomous cars, we're going to 40% of it or something is going to be all autonomous. There was a signal to drivers saying we're getting rid of you. This in
Right.
this positioning, it's like, hey, we're going to dominate the market, but we are just supplying the tech for other people who are taking the drivers away. We're not. We're just using our the best tech that we have. And I
Right.
think that's a clever move, whether or not that they're aiming for that. It definitely makes it sit a little bit better.
Yeah, I don't think Uber really cares, to be honest.
Probably not, honestly.
But yeah, but I think that from a business perspective, it's a really smart move. And however it sings with drivers, I feel like Uber could ultimately care less. But it is one way that they are putting drivers in vehicles that are going to be still working while this data is being collected. So the drivers live to drive another day, at least for the time being. But I think that Uber has hit a business home run here.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely not driver focused, definitely business focused. But that is the stories for this week. As always, Brian, I will give you the final say until we head into the Memorial Day weekend.
Yeah, we always remind everybody that legal rideshare is available for free legal consultations if you find yourself injured in a car accident. So if you're injured on the roadway, we can help you collect costs of medical treatment. We can help you recover your lost wages, put money in your pocket for pain and suffering. Any other damage that you sustain, we're able to fight the insurance companies and make sure you're fully recovered. Please reach out to us. Time is of the essence, and you can find all of our contact information on our website, which is legalrideshare.com.
Thank you, Brian. And as I like to say, that is the end of This Week in Rideshare. See you next week.